Hi guys, welcome back to Short Skirts and Sarcasm. I'm Caroline, and today we're going to talk about the nonfiction books I have hauled recently. So I didn't get these all at once. I sort of acquired these in bits over the last maybe 6 months. So the first one I'll talk about is Superior by Angela Saini. And as you can see, I've already put tabs in to mark chapters that I think might be relevant or not relevant, of the most interest to me. And so this is about the return of race science. As I'm sure you know, race science and eugenics have been used for multiple centuries throughout history to try to control societies, control populations, and obviously that's not a good thing. So this is about how race science is still being used today. So I think it's very relevant. And so the back says, where did the idea of race come from and what does it mean? In an age of identity politics, DNA ancestry testing, and the rise of the far right, a belief in biological differences between populations is experiencing a resurgence. The truth is, race is a social construct. Our problem is we find this hard to believe. So I am very excited to read this. I've been wanting to read it since it came out, and I did finally get a copy late in 2020. So I will let you know my thoughts on this when I do finally read it. And the next one I want to talk about is this one, The Human Rights Dictatorship by Ned Richardson Little. And I vaguely know the author. We are Twitter friends. I didn't know that he had a book coming out until I got my copy of the Journal of the German History Society. This is the September issue, and I was looking through it, and I found a a review of his book, and I was like, I didn't know Ned had a book. So of course I had to buy it. This I only got I think I got earlier this week, so this is brand new, and I am very, very excited about this. And it's all about socialism, global solidarity, and revolution in East Germany. And it's blurbed on the back by none other than Laura Wildenthal, who is a rock star of German history. So this is just even more exciting. And she says, finally a book on human rights history by someone deeply conversant with socialist thought, state socialist regimes, and current human rights historiography. This is a rare and valuable book as well as a good read. It will be a reference point for years to come. So this is actually Cold War history, which I was going to say I don't know much about. I do know a lot about it because a lot of both international relations and international history focus very heavily on Cold War history, but it is not something I am usually interested in. I don't find the Cold War to be interesting. So this is the first nonfiction Cold War book that I will read for fun. I think ever in my life. So this is cool. It starts in the late 1950s and goes through to the 1980s in, like it says, West Germany. So again, I will let you know my thoughts when I do read this. And the last 3 books I'm going to talk about, I got from Verso, and they recently had a sale. So some of these were 40% off. So who am I to turn down a book sale? I thought it was a great idea to melt a marshmallow on top of my hot chocolate, and it's delicious and I love it, but it is very sticky. So it's an interesting experience. It has pros and cons, we might say. Anyway, so the first one is called The American Crucible, Slavery, Emancipation, and Human Rights, and it is by Robin Blackburn. And the back says, The American Crucible furnishes a vivid and authoritative history of the rise and fall of slavery in the Americas. For over 3 centuries, enslavement promoted the rise of capitalism in the Atlantic world. The New World became the crucible for a succession of fateful experiments in colonization, silver mining, plantation agriculture, racial enslavement, colonial rebellion, slave witness, and slave resistance. Slave produce raised up empires, fostered new cultures of consumption, and financed the breakthrough to an industrial order. Not until the stirrings of a revolutionary age in the 1780 was there the first public challenge to the peculiar institution. An anti-slavery alliance then set the scene for great acts of emancipation in Haiti in 1804, Britain in 1833 to 1838, the United States in the 1860s, and Cuba and Brazil in the late 1880s. In the American Crucible, Robin Blackburn argues that the anti-slavery movement forged many of the ideals we live by today. So it's very fitting that I did get this book in, I got it in January, but I'm featuring it now in February, which is American Black History Month, and I am very excited to read this. I'm excited to read all of these, as you can probably tell, because I keep saying it. And the next book in the mini Verso haul is How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney, with a foreword from Angela Davis. So I'm extra excited. And I think this is not the first edition. I think the first edition didn't have this foreword. This is about colonialism and neo-imperialism after colonialism officially was over. So the back on this one says, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa is an ambitious masterwork of political economy, detailing the impact of slavery and colonialism on the history of international capitalism. In this classic book, Rodney makes the unflinching case that African poverty is not a natural feature of geography or a consequence of culture, but a direct product of imperial extraction from the continent, a practice that continues into the present. Meticulously researched, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa remains an unshakably relevant study of the so-called Great Divergence between Africa and Europe, just as it remains a prescient resource for grasping the surge in global inequality today. In this new edition, Angela Davis offers a striking foreword to the book, exploring its lasting contribution to a revolutionary and feminist practice of anti-imperialism. So like I said, very, very excited. This has been vaguely on my radar for a while, but then I saw that it was, I remembered it and then saw it was on sale at Verso, so of course I had to buy it. My last book in this book haul is The End of Policing by Alex S. Vitale. And as you might guess, this is about policing and how it has problems. It has issues. It's problematic. So the inside flap, I love it. Slight digression. I love it when paperback books have like a nice sturdy cover and have flaps. I'm not sure why this tickles me so much. They don't really do anything, but it makes me happy. It's an extra bonus. So this says, in recent years have seen an explosion of protest against police brutality and repression. Among activists, journalists, and politicians, the conversation about how to respond and improve policing has focused on accountability, diversity, training, and community relations. Unfortunately, these reforms will not produce results either alone or in combination. The core of the problem must be addressed, the nature of modern policing itself. So I did recently read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, and I did also read the 10th anniversary edition, so it has another extra foreword and it is updated from the original version that she published. So I think this will fit in very nicely with that, and of course it's always relevant, but especially relevant given this past year. And the sparked new conversations on police brutality in the US, of course, but also here in the UK, where police brutality is also still a problem. So I do have 2 more books, but they are both Kindle books, so I don't have anything to show you. Small hot chocolate break. Ooh. The first one is The British Museums by Dan Hicks, and I got the Kindle edition of this earlier this year in January, and I read it immediately because Dan Hicks was giving a talk in mid-January, so I wanted to read his book before then. And it's all about the Benin bronzes and how they were removed from Benin physically violently, and how the greater problem of Western museums displaying art and artifacts from formerly colonized and occupied territories, and how that is itself structural violence. This book specifically explores the Benin bronzes, but also talks about how museums are brutish, as you might guess from the title, more generally. And like I said, I have already read this, and I thought the argument was very good. It's very relevant. I thought the writing style was an interesting choice. If I were to write this book, I would use a different writing style, and I think that's just my taste. I did go to the talk that Dan Hicks was giving, and I thought that seeing him speak on the same subject was better than trying to read his work. So I'm not sure if that's just my personal opinion or if other people also had this opinion. But I would still recommend that you read it. It is an important book. And not to say that Dan Hicks is like the first or only person that has ever talked about the structural violence of European museums. That has been an ongoing conversation for quite a while. So the last book I want to talk about in this video is They Were Her Property, White Women as Slave Owners in the American South by Stephanie E. Jones Rogers. And I first became aware of this book when the author was a guest on the Stuff You Missed in History podcast, which is a very famous podcast, but if you haven't heard about it, I suggest you go listen to them, because it is both important history and it's fun and sometimes funny. And the hosts, Tracy V. Wilson and Holly Fry, have a very conversational tone when they talk to each other about history, and they also read listener mail. So it's very fun and very informative. So I do recommend that you check them out. So they interviewed the author, and it sparked my interest in this book. As the title says, it is about white women as slave owners. So I think that is something that popular history doesn't really take into account. It's all about like the patriarchal society of white men having all the power, but it doesn't really talk about how white women also upheld the patriarchal white supremacist society of the antebellum South. So the blurb is a bold and searing investigation into the role of white women in the American slave economy. Bridging women's history, the history of the South, and African American history, this book makes a bold argument about the role of white women in American slavery. Historian Stephanie E. Jones Rogers draws on a variety of sources to show that that slave-owning women were sophisticated economic actors who directly engaged in and benefited from the South's slave market. Because women typically inherited more slaves than land, enslaved people were often their primary source of wealth. Not only did white women often refuse to cede ownership of their slaves to their husband, they employed management techniques that were as effective and brutal as those used by slave-owning men. White women actively participated in the slave market, profited from it, and used it for economic and social empowerment. By examining the economically entangled lives of enslaved people and slave-owning women, Jones Rogers presents a narrative that forces us to rethink the economics and social conventions of slaveholding America. So again, this is one that I wanted to read for a little over a year, and I did finally get it. So I will hopefully be reading that soon and letting you know. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like if you are so inclined. And in the description box below, I will link to the Stuff You Missed in History class podcast episode, and you can also find all my social media, and you can follow me there as well. So until next time, bye!